This year I turned 35, and when I look at my peers, the thing that separates people who are genuinely set up from people that are scrambling to figure it out isn't income. It's whether or not they've hit these 7 financial milestones. And for what it's worth, some of these I did hit early, some of these I almost completely missed. And all 7 of them matter more than what most people realize. So the first milestone is probably the most obvious one, but it's also the one that most people struggle to hit. And that's just having no debt. That means no student loans, no credit cards, no car payments. The only exception here is your mortgage, and I'll explain why in a second. And the reason that this matters is not just because of the money that leaves your account every single month, it's also the psychological weight that comes from having debt. Each payment is another financial responsibility that you have to worry about if something were to happen to your income. And by 35, you've now had 13 years since your undergrad, and even if you're a doctor, you've had 4 to 5 years since you become a doctor. So student loans should be completely gone. And when it comes to credit cards, your cars, and other types of loans, this is usually a result of a lifestyle choice. The debt excuses make sense in your 20s, but you have to give them up by the time you're 35. Because $50,000 in debt at an average 10% interest rate is $5,000 a year. And if you're doing that from now until you're 65, those 30 years of giving away $5,000 every single year, well, that can cost you $600,000 at retirement. Now look, the mortgage is a little bit different. It's secured against an asset that hopefully is growing in value. Typically, it's a much lower interest rate unless you recently bought a home. And while I'm totally all for paying off your mortgage early, I think if the cost of paying off your mortgage early is that you're not able to afford saving and investing, then it's probably not worth it. And by the way, this is all coming from someone who paid off $100,000 in debt and at one point was spending $3,000 a month just on debt payments. Once you can free all of that up, your life is going to look very different. Now, assuming that you are able to clear out all that debt, the second milestone is going to become a lot easier, and that's keeping all of your expenses under 50% of your take-home pay. I'm not talking about eating out or vacations or shopping. I'm really just talking about food, water, shelter, and heat. And really the big villain for this milestone is going to be lifestyle inflation. So that's upgrading your cars, upgrading your house. And I always get people that look at me like I have 2 heads when I say this, but even in this economy, you really need to be doing your best to keep your housing costs under 25% of your take-home pay. Because if you can do that and you have no debt, keeping all of your expenses under 50% is going to be much, much easier. The gap between what you spend and what you make is going to be the engine that propels every other milestone on this list. It's pretty simple. No margin means no investing, and no investing means no wealth. But I'd be willing to bet that 90% of people that are watching this video have no idea what their percentages are. They might have a vague sense of where their money is going or just simply understand that money is tight, but they probably have no idea how much percentage of their money they're investing, what percentage is going to their lifestyle, and what percentage is going towards covering their expenses. So this is your reminder to go and do the math, or at least figure out how much of your money goes towards your expenses. And to do that, just simply take your take-home pay every single month, total up how much money you spend on all of your expenses, and divide your expenses by your take-home pay. If that number is above 50%, well then that's your homework right now. In your 20s, it's understandable if this is like 60 to 70% of your income, but in your 30s, if that number is 60 to 70%, then it's most likely you're falling victim to lifestyle inflation. And look, if any of this is hitting home right now, you're running these numbers, looking at it thinking this is not great, you should definitely hit subscribe. Not only do I put out videos exactly like this stuff, but I create a ton of free digital products like a free budgeting app and a free course to help people become more financially stable. I'll put links to those in the video description if you want to get access to those. Milestone 3 is just having a fully funded emergency fund with 6 months of expenses and a high yield savings account that is completely separate from your checking account. A lot of people skip this step. Maybe they get to a month's worth of expenses or even 2 months of expenses, and then they start focusing on investing instead. And honestly, if you get a month or 2 saved up, that's also pretty good because 70% of people have less than $1,000 saved up. But that's not what we're going for. Because the point of an emergency fund isn't to cover a small surprise, it's to cover big life changes. Think medical events, a job loss, your roof caving in, without having any sort of buffer that can put a lot of pressure on your investments. And I personally made that mistake. At one point, I had my entire emergency fund in investments. And what ended up happening is I got laid off, and at the same time, the market dipped about 25%. And unfortunately, I had to sell some of my investments for a loss just to be able to pay for my bills. Not a smart move on my part. Now, I know that having 6 months in a savings account sounds boring, and it is pretty boring, but at least it will earn some sort of interest. If you have $40,000 in a high yield savings account earning 3.5%, that is like $1,400 a year. So that could pay for your vacation every single year. Personally, I use SoFi and I use Ally as my high yield savings accounts, but I've also included a link to Raisin in my video description. You can basically use them to shop around for high yield savings accounts with the best rates. At the end of the day, you really just want your money to sit there and do nothing, kind of like me on a Sunday afternoon. This account is boring. It's not an investment, and that is okay. That's what it's there for. It's basically insurance, and again, insurance is boring. Now, the next milestone is probably the one that nobody has heard of that's watching this, and it's probably the most useful milestone on this list. It's called the P.A.W, or PA, stands for Prodigious Accumulator of Wealth. It comes from the book Millionaire Next Door, which if you haven't read is a really great read. The formula that it uses is incredibly straightforward. So what you do is you take your age and you multiply it by your income, and then you divide that total by 10. And that is your target net worth. In order to be considered a PA, or a prodigious accumulator of wealth, you need to have a current net worth that is double your target net worth. And look, if you have your target net worth, that's also really great. That means that you're on track to retire comfortably. But the reality is if you have a lower net worth than your target net worth, then you are building less wealth than what your income should allow. The reason why I really like this formula is because it's not a fixed target. It actually adjusts with you as your income changes. So if you hit your PA target at the age of 30 when you're making $70,000, and then you get a raise to $90,000, that PA target will adjust with your age and with your raise. And so you end up chasing the right number for your actual situation instead of some financial benchmark that was put out there for everybody. So run the formula right now, take your age, multiply it by your income, and then divide that by 10, and then compare that to your actual net worth today, which is just taking all of your assets and subtracting any debt that you may have against those assets. Milestone number 5 is investing 20% of your net income every single month consistently. Your 401k, your Roth IRA, your brokerage account, all count towards that 20%. The reality is that most people do invest something, they just don't invest enough. It's pretty common that people will just invest up to their employer match, and they'll call it a day. Which, to be fair, is better than nothing. The match is free money, so you should definitely take it, but that's not what the milestone is. Because typically the match alone gets you 5 to 6% at best. And that's basically a participation trophy when it comes to investing. Now, I know that 20% can sound like a lot, but here's what I want you to know. If you've hit those other 4 milestones that I've talked about, investing 20% of your income is actually gonna be pretty straightforward. The debt's gone, your expenses are less than 50%, you have a fully funded emergency fund, you likely have more cash flow than you think. The question is whether or not you're directing that cash flow intentionally, or you're letting it disappear to lifestyle inflation. And when it comes to investing, just keep it simple, low-cost index funds, make sure that they're diversified, and that way you'll never have to really think about it. For me, my core positions are VOO, VXUS, and QQQM. That means I'm investing in the United States, international markets, growth, very diversified portfolio. And all of those offer very minimal fees. What most of these financial gurus don't want to tell you is that you actually don't need to be that clever to build wealth. You just need to be really consistent and invest in broad diversified index funds. Milestone number 6 is going to be a little bit different than everything else on this list. There's no account to open, there's no formula, there's no calculation. Milestone 6 is actually just documenting a 10-year bucket list. And that's putting real things on paper, experiences that you want to have, goals, just writing everything down. I know this might not seem like financial advice, but bear with me for a second. It's really hard to build towards things that you haven't defined. It's hard to invest 20%. It's hard to get out of debt. And it's especially hard when you don't know why you're actually doing it in the first place. And when you don't know what you're building towards, that's when lifestyle inflation actually starts to kick in. When you know that you want to take a sabbatical at 40, or travel with your kids to Europe before 45, or pay off your home before the age of 50, well, then you start to have things that aren't just dreams, but are line items in your budget. And then you can actually plan for them, you can actually save for them, you can invest for them. So write the list, be really specific, and actually give all of those things a rough timeline. And then look at your list next to your current financial picture and ask what needs to change in order for all of this to happen. This list is the whole point of having your money. And so once you have this list, all of your other financial decisions are just going to be a lot easier to make. Okay, last one, and this one probably will get the most pushback, is just giving away 5% of your money. I can already hear some of you saying, well, my expenses are already too high, I have debt to pay off, I have a net worth gap to fill in. And then here I am telling you to give away 5% more of your income. But what I've noticed in my own life is that when I give money away, I actually end up being better with my finances overall. And it's not because being generous just magically makes you rich. Instead, I think that it actually helps you become more intentional with your money. Most people aren't going to just give away 5% on autopilot. They're going to have to really think about it and make a decision on what they're doing with their money. And when you do that, you're going to start making that decision with everything in your life. And intentionality is the whole game. That's how you actually hit all of these 7 milestones. I also think that this is an important milestone because all the other milestones are about accumulation, whereas this one is more of a counterbalance to it. It's about giving stuff away. It helps you keep your life grounded in something beyond yourself. And in my experience, people that hit the other milestones but skip this often feel like there's something missing in their life. Now, you don't have to start at 5%, you can start at 1%. Really, the habit matters more than the actual amount. And I know it'll be tempting to just automate it, but I think that you should try to be intentional with it. Really think about it every single time that you're giving that money away, and think about how that might be benefiting someone else or some sort of organization. And the other thing I'll say is that people that are hitting this milestone, I'd be willing to bet there's a high probability that they've hit all the other milestones on this list as well. If any of this was helpful, I'd recommend doing 2 things. 1, subscribe to my channel because I'm putting out weekly videos like this one here, as well as subscribing to my weekly newsletter where I actually write different types of helpful financial advice, so that way as many people as possible can reach financial stability.